Every elite mourner in St. Augustine's Cathedral witnessed the single word that turned billionaire Jacob Ortiz's grief into public, agonizing shock. The small boy, a stranger in a bright blue suit, didn't stop running until he crashed into Jacob's legs, screaming a word only a father should hear. Jacob looked down, seeing the unmistakable eyes of his own family staring back, instantly realizing his secret had just been exposed to the entire city. "Mommy told me you'd be here," Brian said, breathless. "She showed me your picture lots of times. I made you something." Behind him, Deborah stood frozen, her face drained of color. Terror mixed with resignation. Jacob's business partner, Richard, appeared. "Jacob, what the hell? Who is this kid?" But Jacob couldn't speak. Brian dug into his backpack and pulled out a folded drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a sun. "This is us," Brian explained. "That's you. That's Mommy. And that's me. See? We're a family." The word family hit Jacob like a physical blow. He dropped to one knee. "What's your name?" The boy beamed. "Brian Ortiz." "Mommy says Ortiz means strong." Ortiz. She'd given him Jacob's name. "Brian," Deborah's voice cut through, sharp with panic. She rushed forward. "Brian, honey, you can't just run up to people." "But it's not people, Mommy. It's Daddy. You said he'd be here." Deborah reached them, hands shaking. "I'm so sorry. I never meant, this wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How long?" Jacob stood, towering over them. "How long have you been in the city, Deborah?" Her eyes filled with tears. "We never left." 3 words. 3 simple words that destroyed 5 years of lies. She'd been here. The entire time. In his city. Raising their son. Alone. The cathedral spun. Around them, mourners whispered. Phones emerged. By tonight, this would be everywhere. His mother would know. Richard cleared his throat. "Maybe somewhere private? The vestry." "Are you coming with us?" Brian tugged Jacob's sleeve. "I have so many questions. Mommy says some things only daddies know." Despite everything, Jacob felt his lips twitch. Those are really good questions. "See, Mommy? He gets it." Deborah's face crumpled. "We should go. This was a mistake." "No." Jacob's voice cut like a blade. "Don't run again, Deborah. Please. Whatever happened, whatever made you leave, we can figure it out. But don't take him away from me. Not again." Their eyes met. 5 years of unsaid things hung between them. "You don't understand," she whispered. "You don't know what I had to protect you from." "Then help me understand." Welcome back, my beautiful family, to Mr. Crown Stories. If no one told you today, let me tell you now, you are not defined by what was taken from you. You are defined by what you chose to protect. I craft these stories for hearts like yours, hearts that have loved in silence, carried burdens alone, and wondered if sacrifice would ever be understood. For those who've hidden to keep others safe. For those who've waited years for truth to surface. For those who believe that love, no matter how buried, can be unearthed and made whole again. If this story speaks to your soul, click subscribe, drop a comment saying "I believe in second chances," and tell me where you're watching from, because tomorrow brings another journey of redemption, and you deserve to be part of it. Every word I write is for you, the one who protected what mattered most, even when it cost you everything. The one who never stopped hoping that broken families can be restored. The one who knows that some secrets are kept out of love, not fear. May your hidden sacrifices be seen. May your silent strength be celebrated. May your family, however it looks, find its way back to wholeness. Let's walk this journey together, hand in hand, heart to heart. Now, let us begin. The vestry was small, lined with dark wood and smelling of old books. Brian immediately went to the stained glass window, fascinated by the colored light on his hands. "Look, Mommy. I'm a rainbow." Richard positioned himself by the door. "I'll make sure no one disturbs you." "But Jacob, your phone's already blowing up. Your mother." "I don't care about my mother right now." Richard nodded and slipped out. Silence fell. Brian pulled out a picture book. "Daddy, do you like trains?" Jacob crouched down, studying his son's face up close. The resemblance was striking. Not just the eyes, but everything. I like trains. When I was your age, I had a toy train set. Brian's eyes went wide. Really? Do you still have it? I do. Would you like to see it? Yes. Can Mommy come too? Jacob looked up at Deborah. She was crying silently. Mommy can come. Mommy will always be welcome. Deborah shook her head. You don't know what happened. Then tell me. Jacob stood, voice sharp. Right now. No more cryptic warnings. Tell me who threatened you. Tell me why you took my son from me. Brian looked between them, concerned. Are you fighting? Why is Mommy crying? No, baby. Deborah pulled Brian into a hug. You didn't do anything bad. You're perfect. Jacob's jaw clenched. Deborah. Did Victor Hale threaten you? Her body went rigid. Not here, she whispered. Not in front of Brian. Please. Jacob's fists clenched. Victor Hale. His former business partner. The man who'd killed himself 5 years ago, or so the story went. Tomorrow, Jacob said, voice leaving no room for argument. You'll come to my office. We'll talk. And Deborah? This time, you're going to tell me everything. Some things can't be fixed. Then we'll burn them down and build something new. Brian tugged Jacob's hand. Daddy? Can you come to my birthday party? It's in 6 weeks. I'm turning 5. That's a whole hand. He held up his fingers, and Jacob felt something crack open inside his chest. I'll be at your birthday party, Jacob promised. And every single one after that. Brian's smile could have lit the city. Really? You promise? I promise. And I never break my promises. Jacob pulled out a business card, handing it to Deborah. My private number. If anything happens, anything, you call me. Day or night. She took it, fingers trembling. Jacob, I'm sorry. For everything. Tomorrow. He kissed the top of Brian's head, the first time he touched his son with deliberate affection. Tomorrow, Brian. I promise. As he left the cathedral, climbing into his town car, Jacob looked back one more time. Somewhere inside, Deborah and Brian waited. His family. After 5 years of emptiness. 5 years apart, and in a single word, she destroyed every lie he'd told myself about moving on. The funeral reception was held in the church hall, a modest space with folding tables and store-bought cookies that reminded Jacob how far removed Arthur Smallwood's world had been from his own. Crystal chandeliers and catered affairs were Jacob's normal. This was Deborah's. He watched her from across the room, trapped in conversation with elderly mourners who patted Brian's head and murmured condolences. She looked exhausted, running on fumes and willpower. Every few minutes, her eyes would dart toward the exit, then to Jacob, then away, like she was calculating escape routes. Richard appeared at his elbow with 2 cups of weak coffee. Security teams in place. Unmarked car outside. They'll follow her home, set up a perimeter. Good. Jacob's eyes never left Deborah. Your mother called again. She's not pleased. Patricia is never pleased. Jacob's voice was ice. Tell her I'll call when I'm ready. Which won't be today. Richard hesitated. Jacob, if your mother had something to do with. Then she'll answer for it. Jacob cut him off. But first, I need to know what actually happened. I need Deborah to trust me enough to tell me the truth. And if she runs again? Jacob's jaw tightened. She won't. Not this time. But even as he said it, he watched Deborah extract herself from the conversation, taking Brian's hand and moving toward the door. She glanced back once, their eyes met across the crowded hall, and Jacob saw it clearly. Goodbye. Not tomorrow. Not later. Goodbye. He was moving before he could think, weaving through mourners with Richard scrambling behind him. By the time Jacob reached the parking lot, Deborah was buckling Brian into a car seat in a 10-year-old Honda with a dented bumper and peeling paint. Deborah. She froze, her hand on the car door. Slowly, she turned. Jacob, please. Not here. Not now. When then? He closed the distance between them in 3 strides. You said tomorrow. But you're leaving now, and we both know you're not planning to show up at my office. Her eyes glistened. I can't, you don't understand. Then make me understand. The words came out harsher than he intended. He forced himself to breathe, to soften his voice. 5 years, Deborah. 5 years of wondering what I did wrong. What I said. How I failed you so completely that you disappear without a word. You didn't fail me. Her voice broke. You never failed me, Jacob. I failed you. By leaving? By taking my son. He stopped, glancing at the car where Brian was pressed against the window, watching them with wide eyes. Jacob lowered his voice. By raising him alone when you should have had help? When you should have had me? I couldn't stay. A tear escaped down her cheek. If I'd stayed, everything you built would have been destroyed. Your company, your reputation, your future, all of it gone. I couldn't let that happen. Who told you that? Jacob's voice went deadly quiet. Who threatened you? She shook her head, backing toward the car. I promised I'd talk. Tomorrow. I'll come to your office. I'll tell you everything. But right now, I need to get Brian home. He's had enough excitement for one day. Jacob wanted to argue, to demand answers now, to refuse to let her leave until she explained everything. But he looked at Brian's tired face through the window and forced himself to back down. Tomorrow, he said firmly. Noon. If you're not there, I'm coming to find you. And this time, Deborah, there's nowhere in this city you can hide from me. It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like a promise. She nodded once, climbed into the car, and drove away. Jacob watched the taillights disappear into traffic, Richard's security team following at a discreet distance. She still runs, Jacob whispered to himself. But this time, I'm following. 5 years earlier. The Ortiz Technologies building at 2 a.m. was a cathedral of glass and steel, empty except for the cleaning crew and 2 people on the executive floor. You don't have to stay, Jacob said, not looking up from the contract spread across his desk. I can finish this myself. Deborah Smallwood didn't look up from her laptop either. With all due respect, sir, the last time you said that, you sent merger documents to the wrong company. That was once. Once was enough. He could hear the smile in her voice. Besides, someone needs to make sure you eat. You've had 3 cups of coffee and no food since lunch. Jacob finally looked up. She was backlit by the city lights, her dark hair falling loose from its professional bun, her blazer draped over her chair. She'd kicked off her heels hours ago. There was something intimate about seeing his secretary, always so polished and proper during business hours, relaxed and comfortable in his space. When did you become my keeper? He asked, but there was no bite to it. The day you hired me and immediately forgot you had a board meeting. She stood, stretching, and Jacob forced himself to look away from the curve of her waist. I'll order food. Thai or Italian? Surprise me. She smiled, that rare, genuine smile that made something in his chest tighten, and pulled out her phone. 20 minutes later, they sat on the floor of his office, Thai loosened, her stocking feet tucked under her, sharing pad Thai from takeout containers. Why do you do this? Deborah asked suddenly. Do what? Work yourself to exhaustion. Build empires. You're already successful. You could slow down, enjoy it. Jacob was quiet for a moment, considering. No one asked him questions like this. Not his board. Not his business partners. Certainly not his mother. Because if I stop moving, he said finally, I have to face the fact that success doesn't feel like I thought it would. It's supposed to be satisfying. Fulfilling. But mostly it's just loud. And when it gets quiet, he stopped, surprised at his own honesty. Lonely. Deborah finished softly. Their eyes met. Held. Yeah, Jacob admitted. Lonely. Me too. She looked down at her food. Everyone assumes working for a billionaire must be glamorous. But mostly I watch other people live their lives while I organize yours. You could leave. Do something else. You're brilliant, Deborah. Any company would. I don't want to work for any company. She looked up again, and Jacob's breath caught at the vulnerability in her eyes. I want to work for you. With you. I want. His phone rang. Victor Hale's name flashed on the screen. The moment shattered. Jacob answered, and Victor's voice cut through the intimacy like a knife. Still at the office? You're going to burn out, my friend. And that secretary of yours, you're working her too hard. People might talk. People always talk, Victor. Yes, but usually about business. Not about inappropriate relationships between bosses and their employees. Victor's tone was light, almost joking. But there was steel underneath. I'm just looking out for you. You know how I feel about distractions. Jacob's jaw tightened. Deborah's not a distraction. She's essential to your operation. I know. Just be careful, Jacob. Women like that, they see dollar signs and opportunity. They get ideas. After Jacob hung up, the warmth was gone from the room. Deborah was already packing up, sliding her shoes back on, her walls reconstructing themselves. Deborah. It's late. You should get some rest. Her voice was professional again. Distant. I'll have those documents ready first thing in the morning. What Victor said was none of my business. Good night, Mr. Ortiz. Mr. Ortiz. Not Jacob. She only used his first name when they were alone, when the walls came down. Now they were back up, higher than ever. That was 3 months before she disappeared. Jacob sat in his penthouse, city lights stretching to the horizon, Victor's words echoing in his memory. Women like that, they see dollar signs and opportunity. But Victor had been wrong. Deborah had walked away from everything Jacob could offer. Had raised their son in a small apartment while Jacob lived in luxury. Had kept Brian's existence secret when revealing him could have secured child support, access to Jacob's wealth, everything a gold digger would want. So if money wasn't what drove her away, what was? His phone buzzed. Richard, security team report subject arrived home safely. Modest apartment building, Park Slope. Running background checks on neighbors and building security. Jacob typed back, good. And Richard? Start pulling every file we have on Victor Hale. Everything. Financial records, emails, phone logs. Everything from 5 years ago. You think he's involved? I know he is. I just need to prove it. Jacob poured himself a scotch he wouldn't drink and stared at the city that suddenly felt impossibly large and impossibly small at the same time. Somewhere out there, in a modest apartment in Park Slope, Deborah was putting Brian to bed. Reading him stories. Tucking him in. Doing all the things Jacob should have been there for. 5 years of bedtimes. 5 years of I love you, mommy, and one more story please and the weight of a small body falling asleep in your arms. All of it stolen by Victor Hale's poison. His phone rang. His mother's name flashed on screen. Jacob let it go to voicemail. Whatever Patricia wanted, whatever role she'd played in this nightmare, could wait. Tonight, Jacob had more important things to do. He opened his laptop and started digging into Victor Hale's past. If there were secrets buried, Jacob would find them. And tomorrow, when Deborah walked into his office, he'd have answers ready. Because she still ran. But this time, he was following. And this time, he wouldn't stop until he knew the truth. Jacob didn't go home after leaving the funeral reception. Instead, he found himself driving to Greenwood Cemetery as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood orange. Richard's security team had texted him Deborah's location an hour ago. She'd returned to her father's gravesite alone. Brian left with a neighbor. He found her standing before a modest headstone, arms wrapped around herself against the autumn chill. She didn't turn when his footsteps crunched on the gravel path, but her shoulders tensed. I knew you'd come, she said quietly. Jacob stopped a few feet behind her, close enough to see her breath mist in the cooling air. You knew I wouldn't wait until tomorrow. You never were patient. There was something almost fond in her voice. It's what made you successful. And what made you dangerous to yourself. Dangerous how? She finally turned. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. Because you never knew when to stop pushing. When to leave things buried. Is that what you want? For me to leave this buried? Jacob gestured at the space between them. 5 years of silence, of questions, of a child growing up without his father. Deborah, I spent the last 5 years thinking you left because I wasn't enough. Because I failed you somehow. And today I find out I have a son who knows my name, who's been looking at my picture, who's been waiting to meet me. His voice cracked. So no, I can't leave this buried. Not anymore. Deborah looked back at the headstone. Arthur Smallwood. Beloved father. The dates carved beneath showed he died at 63, too young, too suddenly. My father was the only person who knew the truth, she said. He helped me disappear. Helped me stay hidden. And he took the secret to his grave because he believed, we both believed, it was the only way to keep you safe. Safe from what? From Victor Hale. The name landed between them like a stone dropped in still water, ripples spreading outward. Jacob's jaw tightened. Victor's been dead for 5 years. I know. Deborah's voice was hollow. He killed himself 3 months after I left. But that doesn't mean the danger died with him. Tell me. Jacob closed the distance between them. Tell me everything. From the beginning. Deborah was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of her father's headstone like she was drawing strength from it. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but fractured, like ice beginning to crack. It started the night you asked me to stay late. The night we had Thai food in your office. She smiled faintly at the memory. You asked me why I worked so hard. I told you I was lonely. And for a moment I thought, she stopped, shaking her head. It doesn't matter what I thought. It matters to me. Victor called that night. You remember. Jacob did. The conversation that had shattered the intimacy, that had made Deborah retreat behind her professional walls. He warned me about inappropriate relationships. He did more than warn. Deborah's voice hardened. He called me into his office the next day. Told me he'd been watching. That he knew I had feelings for you, and you for me. He said it was unfortunate because you were destined for great things, and I was, she laughed bitterly. He called me a complication. Jacob's hands clenched into fists. He had no right. He had files, Jacob. Deborah turned to face him fully. Documents showing money transfers from Ortiz Technologies to offshore accounts. Emails with my signature authorizing the transfers. Financial records with my login credentials. He showed me everything, a complete paper trail that made it look like I'd been embezzling from your company for months. The words hit Jacob like physical blows. That's impossible. You never. I know I never. But the evidence said otherwise. Victor was meticulous. He'd built an entire case against me, and by extension, against you. He said if the board saw those files, they'd force you out. Your reputation would be destroyed. The company your father built would collapse. Jacob's mind raced, connecting dots he should have seen 5 years ago. Victor had been the CFO. He'd had access to everything, accounts, passwords, authorization protocols. Creating false evidence would have been easy for him. Why? Jacob's voice was raw. Why would he do that? Because I was getting too close. Deborah's eyes filled with tears. You trusted me, Jacob. You showed me things, asked my opinion on deals, brought me into meetings that secretaries don't usually attend. Victor saw it as a threat. He was embezzling millions, and he was afraid you'd eventually ask me to audit something that would expose him. So he threatened you. He gave me a choice. Deborah's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Disappear quietly, or he'd release the evidence. Not just to the board, to the SEC, the FBI, the media. He'd destroy you publicly. And he said, she stopped, swallowing hard. What did he say? That if I tried to fight him, if I tried to tell you the truth, I'd have an accident. He knew where my father lived. He knew my routines. He said it would be unfortunate if something happened to me, but these things occur when people don't know their place. Rage flooded through Jacob, hot and blinding. He threatened to kill you. He didn't have to say it explicitly. The implication was clear enough. Deborah wrapped her arms around herself again. I went home that night and told my father everything. He wanted to go to the police, but Victor had covered his tracks perfectly. Every piece of evidence pointed at me. And I was, she paused, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. I'd just found out I was pregnant. Jacob's world tilted. You knew? Before you left, you knew about Brian. 2 weeks before. I was trying to figure out how to tell you when Victor called me into his office. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. So I had to choose, stay and fight, risk everything including my unborn child, probably lose because Victor held all the cards. Or leave. Disappear. Keep you safe, keep my baby safe, and hope that someday, her voice broke. I don't know what I hoped. That you'd move on, I guess. That you'd be happy. I wasn't. The words came out harsh. I wasn't happy, Deborah. I was half alive. Building companies and closing deals and pretending it mattered when the only thing that mattered had vanished. I'm sorry. She was crying openly now. I'm so sorry, Jacob. But I didn't know what else to do. My father helped me create a new identity, Sarah Morrison. He moved me to a different neighborhood, paid for a small apartment, helped me find work under the table until Brian was born. He visited when he could, brought money when I needed it, and never once asked me to come back. Because he thought it was safer. Because he knew it was safer. Victor was watching. Even after I left, my father said Victor would ask about me sometimes. Casual questions. Had Arthur heard from his daughter? Did he know where she'd gone? My father lied. Said I'd moved to California, that we'd had a falling out. Jacob remembered those months after Deborah's disappearance. Victor had seemed sympathetic, almost concerned. She probably found something better, Victor had said. Women like that are ambitious. Always looking for the next opportunity. It had all been manipulation. Victor had driven her away and then twisted the knife by making Jacob believe she'd left by choice. When did you find out Victor was dead? Jacob asked. 3 months after I left. It was on the news. Successful businessman found dead in his home office, apparent suicide. Deborah's voice was flat. My father and I thought it was over. That with Victor gone, the danger had passed. But what? She looked at him, and Jacob saw real fear in her eyes. About a year later, my father received an envelope at his office. No return address. Inside was a single document, one of the fake authorization forms with my signature, and a note that said, Victor kept excellent records. It would be a shame if they surfaced now. Ice flooded Jacob's veins. Someone else knows. Someone else was involved, or someone found Victor's files after he died. Either way, the threat didn't end with him. Deborah's hands shook. That's why I couldn't come back. Why I couldn't tell you about Brian. Because whoever sent that note was watching. Waiting. And if I contacted you, if I brought you into this, they'd release the evidence and destroy everything. Jacob's mind was already racing ahead, cataloging possibilities. Victor's associates. His family. Someone inside Ortiz Technologies who'd been working with him. Jacob, please. Deborah grabbed his arm. Don't dig into this. Don't go looking for answers. Some people would kill to keep their secrets buried. Victor proved that. Whoever's holding those files now, they're just as dangerous. Jacob looked down at her hand on his arm, then at the grave of the man who'd helped her hide, who'd kept her secret until his death. You know I can't do that, he said quietly. Jacob. They took 5 years from us, Deborah. 5 years of Brian's life that I'll never get back. First steps I didn't see. First words I didn't hear. 5 years of you struggling alone while I had everything except the only things that mattered. His voice was steel-wrapped in grief. So no, I won't leave it buried. I won't let whoever's behind this keep threatening you, keep threatening our son. You don't understand what you're up against. Then I'll learn. Jacob turned to face her fully, his hands gripping her shoulders gently but firmly. I'll unearth every secret until there's nothing left to hide behind. Every file Victor kept, every person he worked with, every dollar he stole, I'll trace it all. And when I find whoever sent that envelope to your father, they'll wish they'd stayed in whatever hole they've been hiding in. Deborah stared at him, tears streaming down her face. You could lose everything. I already lost everything once. I'm not doing it again. Jacob's voice softened. Let me protect you this time. Let me be the one who fights. You've been carrying this alone for 5 years. You don't have to anymore. She collapsed against him then, her walls finally crumbling completely. Jacob wrapped his arms around her, feeling her shake with sobs she'd probably been holding back for years. The sun had fully set now, the cemetery cast in twilight shadows. Somewhere in the distance, a groundskeeper was closing the gates. But Jacob held Deborah in the growing darkness and made a silent vow to the ghost of Arthur Smallwood, to the memory of what had been stolen, and to the future he intended to reclaim. Victor Hale had thought he could bury the truth. He was wrong. Jacob's office at Ortiz Technologies occupied the entire 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city he'd conquered through steel and strategy. But this morning, he wasn't looking at the skyline. He was staring at 5 years of financial records spread across his conference table like a treasure map to hell. These are all Victor's accounts. Richard stood beside him, tablet in hand, his expression grim. Everything we could access legally. But there's more: encrypted files, offshore transactions, shell corporations that lead nowhere. Jacob pointed to a cluster of highlighted entries. Look at these dates. Transfers continued for 6 months after Victor's death. Richard leaned closer. Someone else had access. Not just access. Control. Jacob pulled up another document on his laptop. I had our cybersecurity team run a deep analysis. Every transaction after Victor's death was authorized from inside this building. Same security protocols, same IP range. Someone on our payroll has been managing Victor's accounts for 5 years. Jesus. Richard scrolled through the data. How much are we talking? 12 million. Moved in increments small enough to avoid automatic flags, large enough to matter. Jacob's voice was ice. And if the pattern holds, whoever's doing this has been watching. Waiting. Probably wondering when I'd finally figure it out. They knew about Deborah. They sent that envelope to her father. They've been using the threat of exposure to keep her silent and keep themselves safe. Jacob closed the laptop with deliberate calm. But they made a mistake. They assumed I'd never find out about Brian. That Deborah would stay hidden forever. Richard set down his tablet. So what's the play? I need names. Everyone who had access to Victor's files. Everyone who worked closely with him. Everyone who's made unusual financial moves in the past 5 years. Jacob's eyes were hard. And I need it done quietly. If whoever's behind this knows we're looking, they'll burn the evidence and disappear. I'll get our team on it. Full background checks, financial audits, digital forensics. Richard paused. What about Deborah? Does she know you're investigating? Jacob thought about last night at the cemetery, the way she begged him not to dig deeper, the terror in her eyes when she talked about people willing to kill to keep secrets buried. She knows I won't stop, he said quietly. But she doesn't know how far I'm willing to go. You're certain? The digital forensics don't lie. Marcus has been accessing Victor's accounts for 5 years. Moving money, maintaining the shell corporations, keeping everything alive. Richard paused. Jacob, there's more. Tell me. We found encrypted communications between Marcus and Victor dated 3 weeks before Victor's death. Marcus knew about Deborah. He knew about the blackmail. He knew everything. Jacob's vision tunneled. 5 years. 5 years of Marcus sitting in meetings, offering advice, pretending to be loyal, while holding a knife to Deborah's throat. Bring him in, Jacob said coldly. Tomorrow. Tell him I want to discuss quarterly projections. Don't let him know we're on to him. Jacob. And Richard? Have security ready. If Marcus runs, I want him stopped. Jacob ended the call and turned back to the playground. Deborah was helping Brian across the monkey bars, her laughter floating across the park. She looked younger in the sunlight, less burdened. Almost like the woman he'd fallen for 5 years ago. He walked back to them, his mind already racing through strategy. Marcus would have to be handled carefully. One wrong move and he'd destroy the evidence, or worse, make good on Victor's old threats. Everything okay? Deborah asked as Brian ran off to explore a sandbox. No. Jacob met her eyes. But it will be. Soon. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Richard. You were right. The money trail didn't die with Victor Hale. It just changed hands. Jacob pocketed the phone and watched his son build castles in the sand, innocent and unaware of the war being waged to keep him safe. The trail led to Marcus Levin. And tomorrow, Jacob would make him pay. The Ortiz Technologies boardroom was designed to intimidate. 40 feet of polished mahogany, leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars, and windows that made the city below look like a kingdom waiting to be conquered. Jacob had closed deals worth billions in this room. Today, he was going to destroy a traitor. Marcus Levin arrived precisely on time, his tailored suit and easy smile the picture of corporate confidence. He'd been Jacob's CFO for 2 years, Victor's protégé before that. 12 years of loyalty, or so Jacob had believed. Jacob. Marcus set his briefcase on the table. Richard said you wanted to discuss quarterly projections? I have the reports ready. Sit down, Marcus. Something in Jacob's voice made Marcus pause. His smile flickered. Is everything all right? That depends. Jacob remained standing, positioned between Marcus and the door. How do you define all right? Because from where I'm standing, discovering that my CFO has been embezzling $12 million and blackmailing the mother of my child doesn't quite qualify. The color drained from Marcus's face. For a heartbeat, he looked like he might run. Then his expression hardened into something cold and calculating, the mask finally dropping. You can't prove anything. Can't I? Jacob pulled out his phone, swiped through screens, and turned it toward Marcus. Financial records. Transaction histories. IP addresses. 5 years of evidence laid out in damning detail. Our cybersecurity team is very thorough. Every transfer, every login, every keystroke, all traced back to your terminal. Marcus's jaw clenched. Victor made me. Victor's been dead for 5 years. You've been managing his accounts, moving his money, maintaining his shell corporations. Jacob's voice was ice. And more than that, you've been threatening Deborah Smallwood. The envelope sent to her father? That was you. Protecting my investment. Marcus stood slowly, his hands flat on the table. Victor was sloppy. He let emotions cloud his judgment. But I saw the bigger picture. The proprietary data we were moving, the offshore accounts, the connections we'd built, it was worth billions if managed correctly. Jacob felt rage building behind his ribs, cold and controlled. So you continued his work. Used his blackmail as leverage to keep Deborah silent. She was a loose end. Victor should have dealt with her permanently, but he was weak. Threatened by a secretary who got too close to you. Marcus smiled, and it was ugly. I simply maintained the status quo. As long as she stayed hidden, everyone benefited. Everyone except Deborah. And my son. Your son. Marcus laughed, bitter and sharp. You didn't even know he existed until 3 days ago. Don't pretend you're the victim here, Jacob. You built your empire while I did the dirty work. Victor understood that success requires sacrifice. Victor understood nothing. Jacob's voice cracked like a whip. He was a thief and a coward who killed himself rather than face consequences. And you're worse, you inherited his crimes and expanded them. Marcus's expression shifted, something dangerous sliding behind his eyes. Be very careful, Jacob. I have copies of every document Victor created. The fake evidence against Deborah, the authorization forms with her signature. One phone call to the SEC and this company collapses. Your reputation, your legacy, everything your father built, gone. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Marcus picked up his briefcase, calm now, in control again. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget this conversation. Forget everything you think you know. And in exchange, I'll forget to mention that you've been harboring a woman wanted for embezzlement. That you have a secret child you failed to report to the board, a child who could be used as leverage against you. The words hung in the air like poison. Jacob took a step closer. You're threatening my family. I'm protecting my interests. Just like Victor did. Just like you would if you were smart. Marcus moved toward the door. Walk away, Jacob. You've already lost 5 years. Don't lose everything else. You touched my family once. Jacob's voice was deadly quiet. You won't get the chance again. Marcus turned, hand on the door. That almost sounds like a threat. It's a promise. For a moment, they stood in silence. Two men who'd worked together for years, who'd built an empire together, now enemies separated by 5 years of lies and a child Marcus had used as leverage. "We're done here," Marcus said finally, opening the door. "Not quite." Richard stepped into the doorway, blocking Marcus's exit. Behind him, 2 security guards flanked the entrance. Marcus's eyes widened. "What is this?" "This," Jacob said, pulling a small recording device from his pocket, "is insurance. Everything you just said, every threat, every confession, every detail about continuing Victor's crimes, all recorded." Marcus lunged for the device, but Richard caught his arm, twisting it behind his back with practiced efficiency. The security guards moved in, securing Marcus as he struggled. "You can't do this." Marcus shouted. "I have evidence, I'll destroy you. You have copies of fake documents that I can prove are fake. I have recordings of you confessing to embezzlement, blackmail, and threatening my family." Jacob pocketed the recording device. "The question is, which evidence will the board find more compelling?" Marcus stopped struggling, his breath coming in short gasps. "Jacob, wait. We can make a deal. I'll return the money, destroy the files, disappear. You'll never hear from me again." "No deals." Jacob's voice was final. "You had 5 years to disappear. 5 years to do the right thing. Instead, you terrorized an innocent woman and kept my son from me. There's no deal that makes up for that." Richard pulled out his phone. "Should I call the police or the SEC first?" "Both." Jacob turned away from Marcus, unable to look at him anymore. "And Richard? Make sure they understand the full scope of his crimes. I want him in a cell by tonight." As security dragged Marcus out, still shouting threats and promises that meant nothing now, Jacob stood at the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, Deborah and Brian were going about their day, unaware that the threat hanging over them for 5 years was finally being neutralized. His phone buzzed. A text from Deborah. "Are you still coming for dinner? Brian made you a drawing." Jacob started to reply when another message came through. "Unknown number. You made a mistake." Marcus was just the beginning. Ice flooded his veins. Jacob immediately called Richard, who was still in the hallway coordinating with security. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that suggests Marcus wasn't working alone." Deborah's hands shook as she stared at the envelope that had been slipped under her apartment door. No postage. No return address. Just her name, her real name, not the alias she'd been using, written in block letters. Inside was a single photograph. Brian at the park yesterday. Jacob pushing him on the swings. Both of them laughing, unaware they were being watched. On the back, a message, "How sweet. It would be a shame if something happened to disrupt this happy family." The photo slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the floor. She grabbed her phone with trembling hands and called Jacob. He answered on the first ring. "Deborah. Someone's watching us." Her voice cracked. "They sent a photo. From yesterday at the park. They know about you and Brian. Lock the door. Don't let anyone in." Jacob's voice was controlled but urgent. "I'm sending security. They'll be there in 5 minutes." "Jacob, what's happening?" "I thought Marcus." "Marcus wasn't alone. There's someone else." A pause. "Where's Brian?" Deborah looked toward the bedroom where Brian was napping. "Asleep. He's safe." Her voice broke. "They were watching him, Jacob. Taking pictures while we—" "Listen to me." Jacob's voice cut through her panic. "Brian is safe. You're safe. I'm not going to let anything happen to either of you. But I need you to stay calm and do exactly what I say." A knock on the door made Deborah jump. "Someone's here," she whispered. "Don't answer it." "Ms. Morrison?" A male voice called through the door. "I'm Officer Chun with Building Security. Mr. Ortiz sent us." Deborah looked through the peephole. 2 men in security uniforms stood in the hallway, IDs visible. "They're here," she told Jacob. "Check their badges. Officer Chen and Officer Rodriguez. Both mid-30s, Chen is Asian, Rodriguez is Hispanic." Deborah verified. "It's them. Let them in." They'll stay with you until I get there. Jacob. I'm coming, Deborah. 20 minutes. And Deborah. His voice softened slightly. We're going to end this. Whoever's behind this, whatever they're planning, they made the same mistake Victor and Marcus made. What mistake? They threatened my family. And that's something I don't forgive. The line went dead. Deborah opened the door, letting the security officers inside. They swept the apartment efficiently, checking windows and locks, positioning themselves with clear sightlines to all entrances. Brian wandered out of the bedroom, rubbing his eyes. Mommy? Why are there policemen here? Deborah pulled him into her arms, holding him tight. They're friends of Daddy's. They're here to keep us safe. Safe from what? From shadows that wouldn't stay buried. From crimes committed 5 years ago that kept reaching forward. From people who thought a child and his mother were acceptable casualties in their game of greed and power. From bad people, baby. Deborah kissed the top of his head. But don't worry. Daddy's coming. And when Daddy's here, nothing bad can happen. She hoped that was true. She hoped Jacob's fury and resources and determination were enough to end this nightmare once and for all. But as she held Brian and waited for Jacob to arrive, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real danger was just beginning. Jacob arrived at Deborah's apartment to find the door hanging open, one security officer unconscious in the hallway, the other nowhere to be seen. His heart stopped. Deborah. Silence answered him. The kind of silence that screamed. He burst through the doorway, his expensive shoes crunching on broken glass. The apartment had been torn apart, furniture overturned, drawers emptied, Brian's toys scattered like casualties across the floor. The photograph of Brian from the park lay in the center of the chaos, a calling card. Richard appeared behind him, phone already pressed to his ear. Security Team 2 is down. Officers Chen and Rodriguez. Chen's unconscious, Rodriguez is missing. Calling it in now. Jacob's vision tunneled. The living room. The kitchen. Brian's bedroom, empty, the Spider-Man sheets torn from the bed. Deborah's room, signs of struggle, a broken lamp, blood on the carpet. Blood. Jacob. Richard's hand on his shoulder. We need to find them. Jacob's voice came from somewhere deep and cold, a place he'd never accessed before. Find them now. Richard was already coordinating. Tracking Chen's body camera. Feed cuts out at 6:47 p.m. Rodriguez's phone last pinged 3 blocks east. Pulling traffic camera footage from surrounding area. Jacob forced himself to think through the panic clawing at his throat. Professional kidnappers. They'd taken out train security, grabbed Deborah and Brian, and vanished in under 5 minutes. This wasn't random. This was planned. Marcus's arrest had triggered this. Whoever sent that photograph knew Jacob was getting close. And they'd retaliated the only way that would truly break him. By taking his family. Not again, his mind screamed. 5 years ago she disappeared and I couldn't find her. I can't lose them again. I can't. Jacob. Richard thrust a tablet into his hands. Traffic cameras caught a black van heading east on Monroe. No plates. Tinted windows. 2 occupants in front, movement in back. It was them. It had to be. Where is it now? Lost it near the warehouse district. But, Richard pulled up another screen. Rodriguez's phone is still active. If they haven't found it yet. They haven't. Jacob was already moving, grabbing his coat. They're professionals, but they're in a hurry. Deborah would have fought. Brian would have been terrified. They were focused on containment, not details. Jacob, we should call the police. No police. Jacob's voice was ice. These people have been operating in shadows for 5 years. They have contingencies, exit strategies. The moment they see police, Deborah and Brian are dead. He met Richard's eyes. This stays between us and our security team. No one else. Richard nodded grimly. I'll assemble everyone. Where? The warehouse district. And Richard. Jacob paused at the door, looking back at the destroyed apartment, at Brian's toys scattered across the floor like broken promises. Tell them to come armed. Whatever it takes to get them back, Whatever it takes. The warehouse district at night was a maze of shadows and rusted metal, buildings that had housed manufacturing empires now hollowed out and forgotten. Perfect place to hide. Perfect place to disappear. Jacob's convoy of 3 vehicles approached in darkness, headlights off, guided by the signal from Rodriguez's phone. It was weak but steady, emanating from a warehouse 2 blocks ahead. Thermal imaging shows multiple heat signatures inside, Richard reported from the passenger seat. 4 adults, 1 child. Second floor, northwest corner. 4 adults. 2 kidnappers plus Deborah and Rodriguez. Or 3 kidnappers and just Deborah. Where's Brian? Jacob's voice was tight. Richard adjusted the tablet. Smaller heat signature, same location. He's with them. Relief and terror warred in Jacob's chest. They were alive. But for how long? The vehicles stopped a block away. Jacob's security team, 8 men, all ex-military, all loyal, assembled in the darkness. Richard tried one more time. Jacob, let the team handle this. You don't need to. Yes, I do. Jacob checked the pistol Richard had given him, the weight foreign but necessary in his hand. They took my family. I'm getting them back. The team moved like ghosts through the darkness, communicating through hand signals and earpieces. Jacob stayed close to Richard, every instinct screaming at him to run ahead, to burst through doors, to find Deborah and Brian by sheer force of will. But he'd hired these men because they were the best. So he followed their lead, trusted their training, and tried not to think about what might be happening 2 floors above them. They entered through a side door, metal shrieking softly. The warehouse was a cathedral of abandonment, broken machinery, graffiti-covered walls, pigeons roosting in the rafters. Moonlight streamed through shattered windows, painting everything in silver and shadow. Voices drifted from above. Male. Angry. Told you this was a mistake. Ortiz has resources. Ortiz has money. Money doesn't matter when you're desperate. A different voice, colder. He'll pay anything to get them back. That's the play. And if he doesn't? A pause. Then Victor's widow gets what she wants. Ortiz destroyed, his family gone. Either way, we get paid. Victor's widow. Patricia Hale. Of course. The woman who'd lost her husband to suicide, who'd blamed Jacob for driving Victor to it. She'd been the shadow behind everything, not content to let Victor's death end her revenge. Jacob's rage crystallized into something sharp and purposeful. The team reached the second floor. Through a partially open door, Jacob could see them. 2 men, both armed. Deborah sat against the wall, zip-tied, her face bruised but defiant. Brian was in her lap, crying quietly. And Rodriguez, slumped in the corner, unconscious or worse. One of the kidnappers, tall, scarred, paced with a phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what Ortiz is offering. Mrs. Hale's offer is better. We deliver them to her, we get paid double and disappear. It's clean. The team leader signaled. 3 seconds. 2. 1. They moved. The door burst open. Flashbangs detonated, light and sound overwhelming the space. Jacob was moving before the echo faded, his focus laser-locked on one thing, getting to Brian and Deborah. The scarred kidnapper raised his weapon. Jacob's security guard was faster, tackling him before he could fire. The second kidnapper tried to grab Brian. Deborah threw herself between them, taking a vicious blow to her head that sent her sprawling. No. Jacob's voice tore through the chaos. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his pistol trained on the second kidnapper. Step away from them. The man froze, hands raised. You don't understand, Mrs. Hale, she. I understand perfectly. Jacob's hand didn't shake. Patricia Hale hired you to take my family. To either ransom them or kill them. Which was it going to be? The kidnapper's eyes darted toward Deborah, toward Brian who was sobbing uncontrollably. Ransom. We were just supposed to hold them until she could use them to destroy me. Jacob moved closer, his fury a living thing. Where is she? Where's Patricia? I don't know, man. We just get calls, instructions, payments in crypto. Not good enough. Jacob's finger tightened on the trigger. Jacob. Richard's voice cut through. He's not worth it. Jacob wanted to pull the trigger. Wanted to make this man pay for every second of terror Brian had endured, every bruise on Deborah's face, every nightmare that would follow this night. But Brian was watching. His son was watching. Jacob lowered the weapon. Tie him up. Both of them. He holstered the gun and dropped to his knees beside Deborah. She was conscious but dazed, blood trickling from a cut above her eye. "Brian," she whispered. "Is Brian?" "I'm here, Mommy." Brian crawled into her arms, still crying. "Daddy came. He saved us." Jacob gathered them both, pulling them into his chest, his hands shaking as he felt their warmth, their reality. They were alive. Bruised and terrified, but alive. "I've got you," he murmured into Deborah's hair. "Both of you. I've got you." Deborah's hand found his, gripping tight. They were going to, Patricia Hale wanted. "I know. I heard." Jacob pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "It's over now. All of it. Patricia, Marcus, everyone who hurt you, they're done." Paramedics arrived, called by Richard despite Jacob's earlier objections. They examined Deborah's head wound, checked Brian for injuries, confirmed Rodriguez was alive but concussed. The kidnappers were hauled away in police custody, already making deals to testify against Patricia Hale. As they loaded Deborah into an ambulance, she grabbed Jacob's hand. "Don't leave us." "Never." Jacob climbed in beside her, pulling Brian onto his lap. "Never again." Through the ambulance windows, Jacob watched the warehouse recede into darkness. 5 years ago, Deborah had disappeared from his life, taken by threats he didn't understand. Tonight, she'd almost been taken permanently. But this time, he'd found her. This time, he'd fought. And this time, he'd won. As the ambulance sped toward the hospital, Brian's small hand found Jacob's. "Daddy? Are the bad people gone?" Jacob thought of Patricia Hale, of Marcus Levin, of Victor's ghost that had haunted them for 5 years. By tomorrow, they'd all be behind bars or exposed. The conspiracy that had stolen 5 years would be dismantled piece by piece. "Yes, buddy," Jacob said, squeezing his son's hand. "The bad people are gone." Deborah's eyes met his over Brian's head. She was battered and exhausted, but there was something new in her expression. Hope. Trust. Maybe even the beginning of forgiveness. "I lost you once," Jacob whispered, just for her. "I won't lose you again." She smiled, tired but real. "I know." And for the first time in 5 years, Jacob believed it might actually be true. Deborah woke to the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the antiseptic smell of hospital air. Her head throbbed where she'd been struck, and her wrists ached from the zip ties. But she was alive. More importantly, Brian. The name left her lips before her eyes fully opened. "Right here, Mommy." She turned her head, wincing at the movement, and found them. Jacob sat in the chair beside her bed, his expensive suit rumpled and stained, his tie gone, his hair disheveled. And in his lap, wrapped in his arms, was Brian, asleep but restless, his small hands clutching Jacob's shirt like a lifeline. "He won't sleep anywhere else," Jacob said quietly. "The nurses tried to take him to the children's ward. He had a meltdown. Said he needed both his parents where he could see them." Deborah's throat tightened. "Both parents." "Both parents," Jacob confirmed, his voice rough with exhaustion and something deeper. "He's been asking for you every 10 minutes. I kept telling him you were fine, just sleeping, but he wouldn't believe me until he could touch you." As if sensing his mother was awake, Brian stirred. His eyes opened, red-rimmed from crying, and locked onto Deborah. "Mommy." He scrambled off Jacob's lap and onto the bed, burrowing into her side with desperate intensity. "You're awake. You're okay. The doctor said you'd be okay, but I was scared." "I'm okay, baby." Deborah wrapped her arms around him, ignoring the pain in her ribs. "I'm right here. The bad men hurt you. I saw them." Brian's voice was muffled against her hospital gown. "But Daddy came. He came with lots of people and lights and noise, and he took us away from the bad men." "I know. Daddy saved us. He promised he'd always protect us. Is that true? Will he always be here?" Brian pulled back, looking at her with those hazel green eyes that were so achingly familiar. Because I don't want him to go away again. Deborah looked at Jacob over their son's head. He was watching them with an expression that made her chest ache, love and guilt and determination all tangled together. "Daddy's not going anywhere," she said, her eyes still locked on Jacob's. "Not anymore." A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "I hate to interrupt, but visiting hours ended 2 hours ago. Mr. Ortiz, you and the child really should." "I'm not leaving." Jacob's voice left no room for argument. "My family was kidnapped tonight. My son is traumatized. I'm staying right here." The nurse opened her mouth, saw the look on Jacob's face, and wisely retreated. "I'll check back later." Brian had already fallen asleep again, his breathing evening out against Deborah's side. She stroked his curls, memorizing the weight of him, the warmth, the reality that they'd both survived. "You should sleep too," Jacob said softly. "The doctor said you have a concussion. You need rest." "I can't." Deborah's voice cracked. "Every time I close my eyes, I see those men. I feel their hands grabbing Brian. I hear him screaming." She stopped, pressing her palm against her mouth to hold back the sob. Jacob moved from the chair to the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb Brian. "They can't hurt you anymore. Marcus is in custody. The kidnappers are talking, giving up everyone involved. And Patricia Hale." His voice hardened. "She'll be arrested by morning. Richard's already coordinating with the FBI." "Patricia." Deborah whispered the name like a curse. "Victor's widow. She wanted revenge. She wanted to destroy me. And she decided the best way to do that was through you and Brian." Jacob's jaw clenched. "She almost succeeded. But she didn't. Because you found us." Deborah reached out, her hand finding his. Their fingers intertwined automatically, fitting together like pieces that had always belonged. "How did you know where to look?" "Rodriguez's phone. And blind luck. And," he stopped, his voice going rough. "And the fact that losing you once nearly destroyed me. Losing you a second time? I wouldn't have survived it." Deborah's eyes filled with tears. "Jacob. I thought I was protecting you by staying away. By not pushing harder to find you 5 years ago. By accepting your disappearance as choice rather than coercion." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "But all I did was abandon you when you needed me most. You didn't know. I made sure you didn't know. Because you thought you were protecting me." Jacob's eyes met hers, and Deborah saw everything in them. 5 years of pain, of longing, of questions that had finally found answers. "You gave up everything to keep me safe. Your job, your home, your name. You raised our son alone, struggled and suffered in silence, all because you thought it would save me. It did save you. Victor and Marcus would have destroyed your company. They would have tried. Maybe they would have succeeded. But Deborah," his voice broke. "Companies can be rebuilt. Reputations can be repaired. But you, Brian, you're irreplaceable. And I would have traded every dollar, every building, every success to have you both with me." Fresh tears spilled down Deborah's cheeks. "I thought you'd be better off without me. That you'd move on, find someone appropriate, someone from your world." "I didn't want someone from my world. I wanted you." Jacob's free hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "Late nights in the office. Thai food on the floor. The way you looked at me like I was more than just money and power. You saw me, Deborah. The real me. And I've been half blind ever since you left." "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "I didn't know you'd stop living too. You were never protecting me, you were saving us both. From Victor, from his schemes, from a threat we couldn't see coming." Jacob's voice softened. "But it's my turn now. My turn to protect you, to fight for us, to make sure nothing and no one ever threatens our family again." "Our family." The words felt foreign and right all at once. "Our family," Jacob confirmed. He shifted closer, his forehead resting against hers, Brian sleeping peacefully between them. "I love you, Deborah. I loved you 5 years ago when I was too much of a coward to say it. I loved you every day you were gone, even when I tried to convince myself I'd moved on. And I love you now, bruised and exhausted and more beautiful than any woman has a right to be." Deborah's breath caught. 5 years. 5 years of silence and distance, and believing love was a luxury she couldn't afford. And here was Jacob, sitting in a hospital room at 3 in the morning, holding their son and confessing his heart like it was the simplest truth in the world. "I love you too," she whispered, the words breaking something open inside her chest. "I never stopped. Even when I thought I should. Even when staying away was killing me. I loved you through every lonely night, every time Brian asked about his father, every moment I wished things could be different." Jacob kissed her then, soft and careful, mindful of her injuries and their sleeping son between them. It wasn't the passionate reunion of romance novels. It was better. It was real. It was 5 years of grief and longing compressed into a single moment of connection. When they finally pulled apart, Deborah was crying openly, but this time from relief rather than pain. "We're going to be okay," Jacob said, and it wasn't a question. "We're going to be okay," Deborah agreed. Brian shifted in his sleep, his small hand reaching out to grab both of theirs, linking them together. His voice was drowsy but content when he murmured, "Daddy's here now. We're all here." "Yes, we are," Jacob said, looking at Deborah with everything he felt written plainly on his face. "And we're staying together. Whatever comes next, we face it as a family." Deborah nodded, too overcome to speak. She'd spent 5 years protecting Jacob from threats she couldn't fight alone. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had Jacob's resources, his determination, his love. And more than that, she had herself back. The woman who'd been forced to hide, to survive on scraps and fear, could finally step back into the light. The monitors continued their steady beeping. Outside the hospital room, the world kept turning: police investigations, corporate scandals, enemies to be brought to justice. But inside this small space, with her son sleeping peacefully and Jacob holding her hand like he'd never let go again, Deborah finally allowed herself to believe. The nightmare was ending. And maybe, just maybe, they could start building the dream they'd been denied 5 years ago. "Get some rest," Jacob said softly. "I'll be right here when you wake up. Promise." "Promise. And I never break my promises." Deborah's eyes drifted closed, exhaustion finally claiming her. But this time, when she slept, there were no nightmares. No kidnappers or threats or fears of being found. Just the warmth of her son beside her and the steady presence of the man she loved keeping watch over them both. Just family. Just home. Just the beginning of forever. 3 weeks after the kidnapping, Jacob stood at a podium facing a sea of reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers. The Ortiz Technologies headquarters lobby had been transformed into a press conference venue, a calculated choice. Transparency, Richard had advised. Show them you have nothing to hide. Jacob adjusted the microphone and began. 5 years ago, my company was being systematically robbed by 2 men I trusted, Victor Hale and Marcus Levin. They embezzled over $12 million, created false evidence to frame an innocent woman, and when their crimes threatened exposure, they resorted to blackmail, threats, and ultimately kidnapping. His voice was steady, controlled. "Today, I'm here to set the record straight." He gestured to the screen behind him, where documents appeared, transaction records, emails, recordings of Marcus's confession. 5 years of corruption laid bare for the world to see. Marcus Levin has been charged with embezzlement, blackmail, conspiracy to kidnap, and attempted murder. His trial began yesterday, and the evidence against him is irrefutable. But this isn't just about one man's crimes. It's about the culture that allowed those crimes to flourish. Jacob paused, meeting the eyes of the reporters. "I failed to protect someone under my care. Deborah Smallwood was my secretary, my trusted colleague, and though I didn't know it at the time, the mother of my child. When she disappeared 5 years ago, I accepted it as her choice rather than questioning what might have driven her away. That failure is on me." The murmurs rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Jacob continued. "But today, I'm announcing several changes to Ortiz Technologies. First, we're implementing a comprehensive ethics program, independent oversight, anonymous reporting channels, and zero tolerance for harassment or intimidation. Second, we're establishing a fund to compensate any employees who suffered under Victor Hale's tenure. And third," he looked directly into the cameras, Ms. Smallwood's name is officially cleared. The evidence against her was fabricated. She was a victim, not a criminal. And Ortiz Technologies owes her an apology and restitution. A reporter shouted from the back, "Mr. Ortiz, is it true you have a child with Ms. Smallwood?" Jacob's expression softened. "I have a 4-year-old son named Brian. He's extraordinary. And yes, I'm his father, a fact I only learned recently due to the circumstances surrounding Ms. Smallwood's forced disappearance. My son and his mother will receive my full support, protection, and love for the rest of my life." "What about Patricia Hale?" another reporter called. "Rumors say she orchestrated the kidnapping." Jacob's voice went cold. "Patricia Hale funded and directed the kidnapping of a woman and child in an attempt to destroy me. The evidence is overwhelming: wire transfers, recorded communications, testimony from the men she hired. She'll face federal charges. And if she thinks her dead husband's legacy will protect her, she's mistaken. Victor Hale was a criminal. His widow chose to continue his work. They'll both be remembered accordingly." As if summoned by her name, Patricia Hale herself pushed through the crowd, flanked by expensive lawyers. She was 60, elegant despite her age, her face a mask of controlled fury. "Jacob Ortiz." Her voice cut through the murmurs. "You destroyed my husband. Drove him to suicide with your ambition and recklessness. Everything I did was justice. Justice." Jacob's voice was ice. "You hired men to kidnap a 4-year-old child. To terrorize an innocent woman. To hold them hostage. What part of that is justice, Patricia? Victor loved this company. He built it with your father. And you pushed him out, made him desperate. Victor embezzled millions and framed Deborah Smallwood to cover his crimes." Jacob descended from the podium, closing the distance between them. Security moved to intercept, but he waved them off. "Your husband was a thief and a bully. And when he realized he was about to be exposed, he took the coward's way out. That's not my fault. That's his." Patricia's composure cracked. "You have no proof." "I have recordings." Jacob pulled out his phone, pressed play. Patricia's voice filled the lobby, cold, clinical, discussing payment terms with the kidnappers, specifying that Jacob should suffer before they released any hostages. The color drained from Patricia's face. That was illegally obtained. That was a conversation you had in a parking garage with known criminals. Jacob pocketed the phone. "The FBI has the originals. Along with wire transfer records, text messages, and testimony from everyone you hired. Your lawyers can explain the rest." Patricia's attorneys were already pulling her toward the exit, their faces grim. As they disappeared through the doors, reporters swarmed with questions. Jacob returned to the podium, fielding inquiries about corporate reform, about Brian, about Deborah. "One last thing," Jacob said, raising his hand for silence. "To anyone watching who's ever been threatened, blackmailed, or forced to hide to protect someone they love, you're not alone. And it's not your fault. The people who hurt you, who twisted your choices into weapons, they're the ones who should be ashamed. Not you. Never you." The press conference ended to thunderous applause. As Jacob stepped down, Richard appeared at his elbow. Marcus's lawyer called. "He wants to make a deal." "No deals," Jacob said flatly. "He terrorized my family. He faces every consequence." "Understood. And the prosecutor agrees. They have enough evidence to guarantee conviction." Richard consulted his tablet. "Patricia's being arraigned this afternoon. Bond will likely be denied given flight risk and severity of charges." "Good." Jacob loosened his tie, suddenly exhausted. "What about Deborah?" "At your penthouse with Brian. She said to tell you," Richard smiled slightly. "She said, come home when you're done saving the world." Home. The word still felt new, like something Jacob was learning to pronounce. He found them in the kitchen, Deborah teaching Brian how to make pancakes, flour dusting both their faces. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment, Jacob just watched. This scene, this simple domestic perfection, was worth more than every empire he'd built. "Daddy." Brian spotted him, abandoning the mixing bowl to launch himself at Jacob's legs. "We're making breakfast for dinner. Mommy says it's allowed on special days." "Is today special?" Jacob asked, lifting Brian into his arms. Every day is special now, Deborah said quietly, meeting his eyes across the kitchen. That's what we decided. She'd moved into the penthouse a week ago, reluctantly at first, insisting it was temporary, just until things settled. But Jacob had watched her slowly relax, slowly accept that this wasn't charity or obligation. It was home. How was the press conference? She asked, returning to the pancakes. Patricia showed up. Deborah's hands stilled. And she's being arraigned this afternoon. Her lawyers are panicking. She'll be in prison by Christmas. Jacob set Brian down, moved to stand beside Deborah. It's over. Really over. She nodded slowly, blinking back tears. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. For someone else to appear with threats or blackmail or... No one else is coming. Jacob took her hand, flower and all. Victor's dead. Marcus is facing 20 years. Patricia will spend the rest of her life in a cell. Everyone who hurt you, everyone who stole our time together, they're done. We're really free. We're really free. Brian tugged on both their hands. Can we eat now? I'm starving. They ate pancakes on the balcony, Brian chattering about his day at the private school Jacob had enrolled him in, about the new friends he'd made, about the train set that now occupied an entire room of the penthouse. Normal conversation. Normal life. Later, after Brian was asleep, Jacob and Deborah sat in the living room with wine they didn't drink, just existing in the quiet. I have a proposal, Jacob said finally. Deborah tensed. Jacob. Not that kind of proposal. Not yet. He smiled. Though fair warning, it's coming. But this is business. She relaxed slightly. What kind of business? Ortiz Technologies needs restructuring. New leadership, new ethics, new vision. And I need someone I trust absolutely to help me build it. He met her eyes. Come back to the company. Not as my secretary. As my partner. Chief Operating Officer. Equal say in every decision. Deborah stared at him. Jacob, I don't have the credentials. You have something better. You have integrity. Intelligence. The ability to see problems I miss. He leaned forward. 5 years ago, Victor saw you as a threat because you were getting too close to his schemes. He was right to be afraid. You're brilliant, Deborah. And I want to build something worthy of that brilliance. I don't know if I can walk back into that building. After everything. Then we'll do it slowly. Start with consulting from home. Virtual meetings. Whatever you need to feel safe. Jacob's voice softened. But I'm not offering this out of guilt or obligation. I'm offering it because you're the best person for the job. And because I want to work beside you again. Late nights, Thai food, changing the world together. A smile tugged at Deborah's lips. That does sound familiar. Say yes. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. Then, partner. Not employee. Partner, Jacob confirmed. Equal say in all decisions. Equal say. And if I hate it, I can walk away. No hard feelings. You won't hate it. Jacob's grin was pure confidence. But yes, if you do, you can walk away. Though I reserve the right to try very hard to change your mind. Deborah laughed, the first real unguarded laugh Jacob had heard from her in 5 years. It was beautiful. Okay. Yes. I'll do it. Yeah. She set down her glass, moved closer to him on the couch. On one condition. Anything. Promise me this isn't just about the company. That we're building a life together, not just a business partnership. Jacob pulled her into his arms, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid reality of her against him. We're building everything together. Company. Family. Future. All of it. Then yes, she whispered against his chest. To all of it. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, the city lights twinkling below them. Somewhere in the penthouse, Brian slept peacefully, unaware his parents were rebuilding the world he'd inherit. Justice had been served. Forgiveness had been granted. And tomorrow, they'd start building something new. Together. 6 months later, the Ortiz estate looked nothing like the cold marble mausoleum it had been. The pristine white walls now displayed Brian's artwork, crayon masterpieces taped at child height, colorful and chaotic and perfect. The formal living room had been transformed into a play area, toy trains winding between furniture that had been rearranged to accommodate a 4-year-old's adventures. The echo that used to haunt the hallways had been replaced by laughter, by running footsteps, by the sounds of a family actually living. Today, the back garden was alive with celebration. Balloons in every color bobbed against a cloudless sky. A bouncy castle dominated the lawn, Jacob's compromise between Deborah's modest party plans and his desire to give Brian everything. Tables overflowed with cake and sandwiches and fruit cut into star shapes. Children ran shrieking through the gardens, their parents chatting in clusters, the kind of normal suburban birthday party that would have been unthinkable in the estate's previous life. Jacob stood on the terrace, watching it all, still slightly amazed that this was his life now. "You're doing that thing again," Deborah said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of lemonade. "What thing?" "That look. Like you're afraid if you blink, it'll all disappear." She handed him a glass, her fingers brushing his. Even after 6 months, the touch still sent electricity through him. "It's real, Jacob. We're real." "I know." He slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "I'm just grateful. Every single day, I wake up grateful." She leaned into him, and they watched Brian orchestrate a game with his new friends, kids from his school, from the neighborhood, from the life they were building together. He was dressed in his favorite outfit, a blue suit jacket over a superhero t-shirt, a compromise between fancy and fun that was pure Brian. "He's so happy," Deborah murmured. "I spent 5 years trying to give him everything on nothing, and you've given him," she gestured at the party, the garden, the life unfolding before them. "This. All of this." "We've given him this," Jacob corrected. "You gave him love and stability and values that money can't buy. I just added resources to what you'd already built." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "You were the foundation, Deborah. I'm just helping build on it." She turned in his arms, looking up at him with those deep brown eyes that still undid him. "Thank you. For fighting for us. For not giving up when I'd already given up on myself. You never gave up. You survived. You protected our son through things I can't even imagine." Jacob's voice went rough. "You thought I was saving you. But you saved me first. I was building empires and dying inside, and you," he cupped her face. "You brought me back to life." "We brought each other back," Deborah said softly. Before Jacob could respond, a blur of blue and red crashed into their legs. Brian, breathless and grinning, his face painted like Spider-Man. "Daddy. Mommy. Come see. Tommy brought his remote control car, and it goes so fast, and can we get one? Please? I'll share it with everyone." Jacob laughed, crouching down to Brian's level. "We can definitely talk about that. How's your party, birthday boy?" "It's the best party ever." Brian threw his arms around Jacob's neck. "Thank you for the bouncy castle. And the cake. And inviting everyone. And," he pulled back, suddenly serious. "And for being here. That's the best present." Jacob's throat tightened. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Even at work. Especially instead of work." Brian beamed, then spotted another friend and took off running, shouting about the remote control car. Jacob stood, finding Deborah watching him with suspiciously bright eyes. "What?" "Nothing. Just remembering a little boy who didn't have his father at his first 4 birthdays. And realizing he'll never have to feel that way again." Jacob pulled her close, hiding his own emotion in her hair. "Never again. I promise." The party continued through the afternoon, cake with 5 candles that Brian insisted on blowing out 3 times because it was too fun to only do once, presents that piled higher than Jacob had intended despite Deborah's protests, and games that left everyone exhausted and happy. As the sun began to set and guests started to leave, Brian collected his presents, examining each with the serious consideration of a curator in a museum. He paused at a wrapped package he'd apparently missed earlier. "What's this one?" He tore off the paper to reveal a large sketchbook and a box of professional art supplies. "That's from me," Deborah said, sitting beside him on the grass. "I noticed you're always running out of paper for your drawings." Now you have a whole book just for your art." Brian's eyes went wide. He immediately opened the box, pulling out crayons and markers, testing each one on the first page of the sketchbook with intense focus. Jacob settled on Brian's other side, the three of them forming a small circle on the lawn as the last guests departed. The fairy lights strung through the trees began to glow in the twilight, casting everything in warm gold. "Daddy, don't move," Brian commanded, selecting a red crayon. "I'm drawing." "I wouldn't dream of it." For several minutes, the only sound was Brian's crayon scratching across paper, his small tongue poking out in concentration. Deborah and Jacob exchanged smiles over his head, content in the quiet. Finally, Brian held up his masterpiece. "Done. Look." It was a drawing of 3 stick figures, one tall with dark hair, one medium with long hair and a dress, one small with curly hair and a massive smile. They were holding hands beneath a yellow sun, standing in front of a building that might have been a house or might have been the entire Ortiz estate condensed into crayon form. "This is us," Brian explained, pointing to each figure with pride. "That's you, Daddy. That's Mommy. And that's me." He traced the line connecting their stick figure hands. "We're holding hands because we're a family and families stay together. Right?" Jacob's vision blurred. He remembered another drawing, 5 months ago in a cathedral vestry, 3 figures that had revealed a truth he'd been blind to. But this one was different. This one wasn't a hope or a wish. This was their reality. "Right," Jacob managed, his voice rough with emotion. "And this," Brian pointed to the sun. "That's because we're happy now. Mommy says happiness looks like sunshine." "Your mommy is very smart," Jacob said. Brian studied the drawing for another moment, then carefully tore it from the sketchbook and handed it to Jacob. "This is for you. So when you're at work, you remember to come home." "Brian," Jacob took the drawing like it was made of gold. It's perfect." "Really?" Brian's face lit up. "Even though I messed up your tie, I forgot how to draw the lines. Especially because of that. It's exactly perfect." Jacob pulled Brian onto his lap, wrapping one arm around his son while holding the drawing carefully with the other. Deborah leaned against his shoulder, completing their circle. "I'm going to frame this," Jacob said quietly. "Put it in my office where I can see it every day." "Will it make you smile?" Brian asked, settling comfortably into his father's embrace. "Every single time I look at it." They sat like that as the sky shifted from gold to pink to deep purple, Brian eventually growing drowsy in Jacob's arms. Around them, the estate that had once been a monument to success and isolation had become something infinitely more valuable, a home. "I can't believe he's 5, Deborah murmured. 5 years old. It feels like yesterday I was holding him as a newborn, terrified and alone, wondering if I'd made the right choice." "You did," Jacob said firmly. "You protected him. Kept him safe. Gave him a childhood full of love even when you were struggling. That took more strength than I've ever had to show. But you found us. When I couldn't find my way back to you, you came looking. You fought for us." She looked at the drawing in his hands. "That little boy feels safe enough to draw pictures about happiness. That's because of you." "That's because of us," Jacob corrected, echoing her words from earlier. "We're better together than we ever were apart." Brian stirred in Jacob's arms, his eyes opening sleepily. "Is my party over?" "The party's over, but the celebration isn't," Jacob said. "We get to celebrate having you every single day." "That's a lot of celebrating," Brian said seriously. "You're worth a lot of celebrating." Brian smiled, his eyes drifting closed again. "Love you, Daddy. Love you, Mommy." "Love you too, baby," Deborah whispered. "Love you, Brian," Jacob added, his chest so full he thought it might burst. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jacob looked at his family, at the woman who'd sacrificed everything to protect him, at the son who'd bridged 5 years of loss with pure, uncomplicated love, at the life they'd built from the ashes of betrayal and pain. 5 years ago, Deborah had disappeared to save him from threats he didn't understand. She'd carried their secret, raised their son, survived in silence because she believed it was the only way to keep him safe. 5 years ago, he'd lost everything that mattered and spent every day since trying to fill the void with success that meant nothing. But today he had everything. The drawing in his hands fluttered slightly in the evening breeze. 3 stick figures, holding hands, smiling beneath a crayon sun. A family. His family. Jacob pressed a kiss to the top of Brian's head, then to Deborah's temple, and let himself believe, really believe, that this was forever. That the nightmare was truly over. That they'd finally found their way home. After 5 years of silence, of searching, of questions that had no answers, Jacob Ortiz finally heard the one word that changed everything. Not from a ballroom floor or a funeral pew, but from a sleepy 5-year-old, safe in his father's arms, surrounded by love, whispering one perfect word before sleep claimed him. Dad.
And that, my beautiful family, is how a man who thought he had everything, billionaire Jacob Ortiz, realized his entire empire was meaningless without Deborah Smallwood and their son. He spent 5 years chasing success, trying to replace the hole in his life with power. She spent 5 years in hiding, sacrificing her own happiness to protect the one man who needed her most. It took a single word, Dad, screamed across a funeral hall, to shatter the silence and bring the truth home. Remember this. True wealth isn't found in a bank. It's found in the people you would risk everything for. If you've ever had to sacrifice your own peace to protect a loved one, know that your courage is the greatest fortune of all. If this story touched your heart, click subscribe, type "family is everything" in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. Because stories of forgiveness, truth, and second chances are reminders that love always finds its way home. Until next time, this is Mr. Crown Stories, reminding you, you are strong, you are worthy, and you are seen.